guys, welcome to our penultimate video in this series of videos on the scientific principles of strength training. It's just a kind of semi-review chat, beat to death, kind of discuss, no, maybe not discuss, you guys don't really say much, it's mostly just me talking, but just chat about the kind of principles outlined in the book, how they apply, and just how I essentially have applied them to my own training and other people's training. Anyway, we are on video number 6, which is phase potentiation. What is phase potentiation? Phase potentiation would be essentially just logically sequencing your training to get the most out of each phase of it. So you're increasing each phase's potential by ordering them in a logical manner. Cool. That's a lot of big words. What does it actually mean? How do I lift the things? It kind of works on the basis that, number one, you can't do the same thing forever because, like we talked about, adaptive resistance, adaptive decay, adaptive resistance, you'll stop adapting to stuff. Adaptive decay is essentially how long it would take to lose your adaptions, like your training benefits with zero training, or how long it would take to lose your training benefits on a different type of training. So if you've done your hypertrophy phase, gained a bunch of muscle, scale weight's gone up, body recomp's pretty decent, essentially like your weight's in the 8 to 12 range has also gone up, you're pretty convinced, like everything's kind of pointing towards to gain city right now, like there's nothing looking negative. You move into a strength training phase, so you bump all your weights up, you bump all your reps down, your total volumes for training go down a little bit, because again, you're focusing on trying to push those numbers and use all this new muscle to see if we can get some new strength gains. How long is it going to be before your adaptions from hypertrophy training, like your new muscle, goes away? Never, if you're training strength. Should be fine, as long as it's intense enough. That's kind of the idea. So as long as the stress remains to keep the adaptation around in some form, i.e. like you might not be doing as much volume, but the weights you're shifting are very heavy, it should stick around pretty much indefinitely. Again, nutrition and other fatigue management factors can play in. That's why fatigue management's up there, really important. But just in terms of the training, should be good. So stacking phases. Just in that example, I said do hypertrophy and then you move into strength training. Why would you do that? Well, if we're talking in terms of specificity, number one important principle, in the context of powerlifting, if you've got a competition, your general strength work is what's going to be like probably the bulk of your work, depending again on your needs analysis. It could be equal or less than your hypertrophy work, but it's usually going to be at least equal, if not more, depending on what you need. And you're probably going to want to do that kind of stuff closer to the competition. I mean, if we talk about it super simply, if your competition is here, you want to start your reps extremely high, hypertrophy, and essentially zip down towards the competition where they will be like your max heavy singles. But I mean, that sounds kind of basic, but thinking about it, hypertrophy phase, high reps, lots of volume, gain a bunch of muscle. Strength phase, slightly lower reps, much higher weight. Use that new muscle that you should have gained in your hypertrophy phase. Again, keep calories pretty much on a fucking even keel right now. I don't like adjusting weight during strength block training because there's a whole bunch of stuff that can get messed with when you're in strength training. Anyway, lower reps, higher weight, use all this new muscle you've gained and make it really strong. Work on your rate of force development. Peak, even lower, much heavier weight, circa mat stuff, and then compete. So that kind of sequence of things would be stacked up for the reason of it's kind of silly to do like 4s to 6s or triples to 6s, like heavy, hard and heavy, strength training, to then go miles away with very low, like lower weights up to super high reps, then peak somehow from like 12s to singles, and then compete. Like, I mean, to most people, I hope to everyone that should make sense of why that's kind of dumb. I also like running it that way. I mean, out with the phase potentiation is just it's gain a muscle, make muscle strong, make muscle competition specific, compete with it. Like that's the general kind of block system we go for. If we're talking about sport training, you essentially have a much broader set of things to choose from because obviously you have your sport as well. So off season is generally going to be like, so if we go like end season, my usual thing would be how fucked up are you? If you are like 9 out of 10 broken, take a decent extensive prehab period of like a month to do some recovery stuff, possibly any, I don't know, what's the word? Any rehabby stuff. I would literally, if you're an amateur athlete, this would be the time to essentially like adjust your budget if you need to and take your gym money for the month and swap the gym money and see how much physio you can get. Like literally zero gym work, do all your rehab stuff with a professional and at home and try and unfuck yourself as best as possible. It'll be safer for your long-term health. After the rehab block of however long, 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, however long you need, depending on how broken you are, then hit hypertrophy, keep in some general conditioning. Again, you need to be reasonably in shape. You can't get out of cardiovascular health. Can you do that with hypertrophy training? Yes. You literally just do cardio either as far away from your weight training sessions as possible, or just do it in the midst of them and realize that your gains aren't going to be as sick as you want. But anyway, and obviously if you're gaining weight or trying to gain weight for a position, although it's not super common, but if you are, maybe keep like essentially see how little cardio you can get away with. Again, if you're talking training volumes, you have to add your cardio and mileage into the total MRV kind of question. You can't be trying to, if you know you can hit like your absolute red line threshold for working sets is like 22, you can't try pushing your mileage and the 22 work sets in a week. Won't happen. You need to account, because if you try both, you'll fall short on both. You need to pick one that you want to do, depending again on your needs analysis. If you're super fucking out of shape, push the mileage so that you can come into season a bit better in shape. If you're super, super weak and small, because you had an extensive rehab period, for example, and did very no training and got some adaptive decay, then push weights. After that, you would go into some kind of general strength training. It's usually going to be combined with some sport-specific stuff, which will be your like fundamentals. Again, my experience is in American football, but you would definitely do some like very like no contact, not full speed, like very base fundamental stuff. Just getting like the groove again, like getting your foot position, getting your hand positions, getting essentially just like getting back into the sport. And then as you build towards the season again, once you hit in season, then you're in your kind of peaking training, where you should definitely just take all the stuff you've been doing in your strength block and do like the bare minimum you need to not get worse and focus on competing. Because again, if you play a sport, you're not winning in the gym, you win on the field. That's like the whole point. You train to be good at the sport, so if training makes you worse at the sport or unable to play the sport, what's the fucking point? And then you essentially mix up that depending on your needs analysis. Again, we've talked about needs analysis, and that could be its own fucking separate video, but I've broken one down before of essentially seeing what you suck at the most or where you could improve the most and prioritizing training around that. Anyway, phase potentiation. So powerlifting context, because that's the most of you guys that watch this videos are the meatheads that lift weights. Hypertrophy, definitely body recomp or anything else like that, diet stuff, do it in hypertrophy. One, because hypertrophy training is the most calorically intensive, like it sucks the most and will require the most calories, and also you're going to get the best bang for your buck on muscle gain in hypertrophy. But also, it is the most stressful to keep muscles around, so you're also going to get your best bang for your buck in terms of calorie deficit from training. So if you're trying to lose fat, hypertrophy is the best time to do that. So, essentially, it would go like hypertrophy, body comp change if you want to go up a weight class, or make sure you are more comfortable in a weight class. So you might be kind of like on the verge of your weight class and maybe have to cut a little water or something to get in it when competition time comes around, you might want to recomp to get down there. Also, you might just want to see if you can get any leaner, because, again, name of the game, have as much muscle on the bones as fucking possible. Like, if you're soft, there's space, so you can there's more potential in your weight class if you are not, like, shredded, essentially. And again, you have to factor in how feasible being that shredded is to budget time commitment around other things. Like, there's a reasonable amount. Like, if you're meal prepping and, like, sacrificing a bunch, like, social things, like going out once every 2 weeks or something, not even to, like, get pissed, just to, like, have human contact outside the gym and work. If you're sacrificing a bunch of stuff and you can only be so lean, you might need to step back on that before you go stir crazy. But, like, you can definitely be very in shape and do that. I'm talking, like, when you're getting, like, ridiculously lean. Anyway, after that, strength training, general strength training. We don't want to do any weight moving in here if we can totally avoid it, because, number one, this is where you typically throw on all your equipment. You can do hypertrophy without a belt and without knee sleeves totally happily. I almost encourage it, depending, again, case-to-case basis. So you chuck on your equipment again, so your belt, or if you compete equipped, your suits and that. You don't want to be fucking around with your weight in that, because, again, it will make your equipment fit and feel differently. Even if you don't lift with any quit, it will make you feel different. Like, everyone, the big word that gets thrown around is proprioception. It's essentially your self-awareness of where your body is in space and how it feels against various things. So everyone will know that if you squat down, you'll know there's a kind of, like, gut pressure on, like, the inside of your hips, where the tightness feels like you know that that's where parallel is, or that's where your squat depth is, and then you reverse it. Like, there's a feel. It's hard to explain, that's, again. But that will change if your body comp is going up and down or just down. Yeah, that will change, and that isn't good, because it, again, will mess with the specificity of the sport practice and will just generally stress you out, because your depth's going to be all over the place. It's going to feel shit. Some days are going to feel great. Some days are probably going to feel awful. Just on the body comp change, if you're going to compete at that weight, you want as much practice as you're going to rock up at competition as possible. So if you're, for example, I'm a 93, I'm, like, just a 93, I think I'm 85 at the moment. So after my hypertrophy phases are done, I'm an 85, and I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm so close to 83, if I could just diet down. No, like, there's no fucking point. I'm not winning any world trophies or getting any mad world records, and aside from, like, international competition, like, there's really no point in really trying to push the boundaries. You could just get better. So 85, I'm just going to stay at that for the whole strength block, like 12 weeks or whatever I've got of my strength block. I could double check. 12 weeks of that, and then compete at probably 85, maybe 84.9, like 85.2. Like, that's about it. It's not going to vary that much, like, as much as weight normally varies with hydration and other stuff, like food mass and shit. So peak, this is generally where we try to maximize strength gains into competition-specific practice, as in handle some super heavy weights as well as clearing training fatigue, because, again, we talked about it in our SRA video. Performance will generally go down in the presence of fatigue, and in which, when you recover from, you will adapt. However, we also talked about supercompensation. Peaking training is a fairly common way to use that, is essentially at the start of your peak, depending, again, how good or bad you are depends on how long a peak you need. Beginner to intermediate really almost don't even need one. Like, people, like, I've seen people compete, miss weights, and then rock up literally the next day and make the weights. So you don't need to peak. Like, if you can't dial it in, it's not even if you can't dial it in. Literally, you're just not good enough at expressing your maximal strength through decent technique that a peak will make that much of a difference. You might as well just deload. Like, literally just, like, training, comps next Saturday, deload, get rid of a bunch of fatigue, compete, will work just as well. Like, I've had people who are in the middle of hypertrophy and wanted to compete for competition practice. That's a different topic, but essentially to, like, help manage get some practice dealing with like the mental stress of the day, because again, for a lot of people it can be overwhelming, though to a lot of people it's also like, anyway, you've got to take it as it comes. It just depends on the person. But you literally can PB out of hypertrophy, so nothing even close to 5s or anything. Literally getting 12s and just having increased muscle led to like increased 1RMs. Ugh. Like, and that's without any heavy 1RM practice, and that's like what I, not even 1RM, but like heavy single practice, which is something I do in my strength training anyway. So yeah, if you're relatively new, you don't really need to peak. Like, you literally can just clear some fatigue, get some stuff done on the deload week to make you feel better, hit the competition, compete, have fun, do needs analysis, see what you need, rinse, repeat. It's also worth mentioning that a lot of people tend to focus on the competition. Like, they tend to be very game day focused, as in like everything leads up to that. I wouldn't really advise that, mainly because like the weight of expectation can get to a lot of people, and can lead to some really bad stuff. I would just stay focused on the process. Like, I would just focus on doing like everything on the day right. Like, worrying about stuff that's like further away than today in training is just not worth it. If you have a coach, let them handle it. I mean, if you're doing your own coaching from watching this video, you have to deal with those things as well, which is why it's typically not great. You have to outsource, I think, to make it like viable long term, if you're a particular stress head. If not, then just crack on. In terms of phase potentiation, peaking can conserve muscle size between 1 and 3 months, and that's usually about as long as it takes for strength to stay around. It's slightly less, it's like more towards the 1 month end for beginners, slightly more towards the 3 month end for advanced lifters, but then again, we literally just discussed that in terms of like beginners essentially don't need to peak, so there's no point like stressing out about it. Like, what are you peaking up to? Like, your weights are like in level of qualification, they're like nothing. Whereas if you need to get like all the way up here, not in terms of you need to gain that strength, it's that you need to have like, you need to step your way in terms of like training maxes, like all the way up. And again, when you start using heavier and heavier and heavier weights, you need more and more warm-up sets, sessions take longer and longer and longer, and then there's a certain cap on how much you can do within one session without like completely destroying yourself. Again, people are like, Ray Williams squats once a week. I was like, yes, that's because most his like one session volume will be most people's weeks or 2 weeks of volume. That's why he only squats once. Like, when you're working sets are like 800 to 900 pounds, that's just ridiculous. Like, that is literally some people's weekly weight. Some people's even less. So yeah, there's a fucking reason he trains once. Also, his legs are like, I don't know, like that around. It's like a hug. Like, think how much damage that, like, think how sore your quads have been after squats. Imagine how fucking sore you could make your quads if they were literally like tree trunks of fiber. Like, that's so many more fibers to destroy. Like, that could be so bad. Phase potentiation. Stack up your blocks in a logical sense. Build muscle. Increase rate of force production with that muscle. Make it competition specific. Compete with it. What do you suck at? Plan your next training. I sucked at. Keep throwing my bench at my dick. I can't, like, flare and face. Sweet. How could you address that? Well, if it's off the chest, probably some shoulder work, just in terms of like pulling it up. So again, you bring it down. It's like a reverse J, because your highest point will be slightly lower than your optimal line, because, you know, ribs. Touch high, and then flare and face and push it back up towards the rack. Why? Because your humerus is only as long as your elbow, and if you throw it that way, you ain't saving it. Like, no one can help you. No one can help you. There's no tears, only dreams at that point. You need to flare up, and that gives you some wiggle room to kind of find shit to push out with. So yeah, if you suck like off the chest in terms of your line, you can address that like we did with the two-pronged approach of hit one specific. You can do your hypertrophy specific to that. So you might jack up your shoulder volume at the cost of, I don't know, some quads, some hamstrings, depending on what you need less, or not even what you need less, what you're going to downregulate. Because again, you have to, if you're going to turn one up to 11, you have to turn one down to 8. Like, you can't have them all at 11. It doesn't work like that. So you're like, oh shit, I'm going to turn up some shoulder stuff. I'm going to try shoulder focused meso. Cool. Turn down hamstrings, something, again, ideally like upper to lower transition, mainly because there's going to be less total involvement from other things. Like, shoulders are going to be in bench and in dips and in any like upper body compound pretty much at all. Rear delts, in rows, shit like that. So hit a bunch of shoulder specific meso. You're going to use the two-pronged approach, and you're also going to do a bunch of strength training that could focus on making your line better. Pausing on the chest, incline pin press is a really good one for line because it's pretty much forcing you to go backwards and upwards because you're on a small incline. Again, use a low incline rather than like a super steep one. Fairly low incline, you bring it down, it touches like a little bit high, and then you have to jack it back up towards the rack because that's where the incline is, essentially. Whereas when you translate it and try to do that lying down flat, it's going to go way back. So, you essentially repeat the whole process. Again, depending on how long your competition is, that could be anywhere between 6 months. You could run 1 month of each, or 1 block of each, in 10 weeks, and then try it again. Don't expect miracles if you're only doing, like, 1 block of hypertrophy, 1 block of strength. You could, like, there's nothing wrong. Like, you could legitimately get better. It's just don't expect, like, ridiculous gains. However, if you have 3 months of hypertrophy, or 3 blocks of hypertrophy, with 2 shoulder-focused mesos, and then like a quad one in the middle, and go like shoulder, quad, shoulder, then strength training block for 3 months where you focus on like 303 bench, 2-second pause bench, and then incline pin press, and then compete again, then expect some ridiculous stuff to happen. You'll probably already figure it's going to happen because somewhere in the strength block you'll bench your PB, like almost guaranteed. And if not, you may need to address fatigue management first. Fatigue management first. Don't think your training is flawed because you suck. Think you suck first, and then fix the training. If you feel like 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, number 1, how long did you sleep in the past week? Like, how many hours a day have you slept in the past week? If you immediate effect stuff, like, yesterday you slept 5 hours, I don't know, because your audiobook was particularly thrilling, then funnily enough, your training today is not going to be great. Is that going to mean your entire month's fucked? No. It just means you might have to downregulate your training today. What have you been eating? Have you been eating shit? Did you go off the wagon? Are you still drunk and or hungover? That might also affect sessions. Not super complicated, honestly. Always address fatigue management first. Then if you're like, I slept, like, I've been getting 7 to 8 hours and my nutrition's on point, like, my macros are right, and I've double checked, I'm not, like, under eating because I'm, like, the only human in existence that doesn't try push the limits of what a tablespoon of peanut butter is. Like, I'm pretty sure anywhere after that much peanut butter on top of the spoon is not a tablespoon anymore. Like, you can't just fit that much or that much on the spoon and call it a tablespoon, as much as that would be great. Yeah. So, if you've addressed fatigue management, you're like, that seems solid, like, then maybe check your training. Because, again, you're not going to be able to do it. Obviously, you have to kind of work both symbiotically. Like, you can't be like, I'ma not sleep and eat like shit, and also be like, I'ma push my MRV. Like, you won't even get close. Like, you won't get close. And then there's no point, because you're never going to find, like, your true red line threshold. Anyway, so that's pretty much all I have to say about phase potentiation, guys. Like, that's pretty much all there is to it. Again, stack stuff up logically. Don't stack stuff up for, like, the right amount of time, depending on how long it is between now and whenever you want to be your best. Work backwards from your competition, and then stack some stuff up. Next video is going to be individual differences, the least important thing. Fuck all you snowflakes. You're not special. Everyone's pretty much the same biologically. Everything applies. Go fuck yourselves.